This is Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball discussion, hosted by Inside the Hall founder and editor, Alex Bozich. Since 2007, Inside the Hall has been trusted by IU fans across the globe to be the one-stop shop for IU basketball news, commentary, and analysis. Join us over at InsideTheHall.com. That's InsideTheHall.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink. Last week, I was fortunate enough to be joined by the great Brian Evans, and this week, his business partner, Dr. Steve Green. Excuse me there, Mr. Green. I forgot to include the doctor there, but
no, Steve, please.
Okay, so Steve Green is with us on Podcast on the Brink, and it's first time having you on the show. It's a pleasure to talk to you. How you doing today?
Doing great. Fantastic. And just remember, Brian wore the coveted number 34. So he was my favorite player because I'm a simple man. I wore 34. So yeah. It was easy for me. I said, gosh, there's a guy wearing number 34 and he likes to shoot all the time. Hey, my kind of guy. So we've been attached ever since.
So how did this partnership with Brian come about? We talked to him a little bit about it last week. Obviously, you guys are running a business together. I think a lot of people have interest in that just because it's, two guys that were very successful Indiana basketball players, and you've now teamed up in the business world. So what's the backstory on that, and how's everything going with that?
Well, a couple of things. It's always been, since I graduated from IU in 75, and finished playing my professional basketball career, I'd always wanted to partner up with a former IU basketball player in some kind of business, because none of us have ever done anything to kind of, parlay, the recognition into anything. And that's just the way we are, which is fine and dandy. But it had always been in the back of my mind. But I never thought, very honestly, well, you know what? I'm going to team up with Brian and let's go after sleep. That's not it at all. So it was about 5 or 6 years ago. I've been doing sleep appliances, sleep devices for snoring and sleep apnea for 15 years now. I have sleep apnea, severe sleep apnea, but I couldn't use the CPAP. So I looked for alternative means, and lo and behold, I'm a dentist, and I found out, hey, dentists can make these oral devices, and in fact should be the only people making these. So I got into it, and I was my first patient. And so that goes along, and I'm being a general dentist, and I'm also being the sleep doc or sleep dentist, if you will. I started focusing more and more on the sleep. It was what I was interested in. So many people got better. It was a nice alternative. So there was a little business there. So I sold my general dentistry practice and have been doing sleep only for a number of years now. But I was talking to Joe Hillman, as a matter of fact, one day at a baseball game. My nephew, Adam Spalding, he's at Bellarmine now, but he was Floyd Central High School pitcher. And so he's a sophomore, I think now sophomore at Bellarmine pitcher. So I'm watching him, and he's pitching against Joe Hillman's son's team. And I just, after the game, hey, Joe, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I was telling Joe, I said, hey, here's what I'm doing, and I want to, expand my business and yada, yada. Joe goes, you need to talk to Brian Evans. And I go, well, yeah, I know Brian, but I don't know him in a business sense. And he said, no, you need to give him a call and tell him about this, because Brian had connections within the medical community, and that's what I was after. So we had lunch, and once Brian understood the severity, really the number of people that are struggling with sleep and sleep apnea and snoring, and not getting the attention they need, we started, going back and forth, how we're going to do this. And so he jumped in pretty heavily. So we've been at it for 4 or 5 years. So this wasn't something that, hey, during COVID last year, I decided, hey, Brian, let's treat sleep. We've been working and fine tuning it for a number of years now, and just went live within the last year. So, and things are going very well, thanks. But that's how we got going. And now I've got Brian, I've converted him now. I'm like, I tell him, I'm like a reformed smoker. It's like, okay, I quit smoking. Now everybody has to quit. Okay, that's a nasty habit. Well, now I sleep well, so everybody's got to sleep well. But that's kind of my gig. And sleep, we know, is very, very important to everything, overall health, not being the least of it. And even in COVID, we were seeing a lot of people that had sleep issues were some of the people that had severe problems with COVID. So anyway, that's how we got together. And the other thing about wanting to be with a former IU player, and I'll be specific here, a former Coach Knight player, we all finish each other's sentences anyway, right? So I know what he went through down there. I know he's not afraid of hard work. I know he can take criticism. He knows the same thing for me. So we're real honest with each other, and we can take it. So that's another big thing, is just knowing his background.
So I'm curious, you were the first recruit for Bob Knight when he took over at Indiana, but growing up in Southern Indiana, IU basketball, during kind of your formative basketball years, wasn't obviously what it would later become. It was a program that was not in the greatest shape in terms of wins and losses. That's obviously why they made a change to Coach Knight. So what was kind of your perception of IU basketball growing up as a kid in Southern Indiana?
It's interesting because people, yes, I was Coach Knight's the first player to sign on in 71. But prior to that, interestingly enough, I was an IU fan because my uncle was a professor in the School of Education at Bloomington, and my aunt was a longtime teacher and counselor there. So I had been an IU fan way back when, and my two heroes growing up were the Van Arsdales. And so, in the 60s, I was watching IU basketball. I loved Branch McCracken. I tell this story often. I lied about my age to get into Branch McCracken's camp, his IU basketball camp, but it wasn't on Bloomington. It was up at Lake James in Angola, Indiana. And so the first year they had it, I was there, saying I was a 9-year-old. And I think I was either 7 or 8, but, I was tall. And my dad was a basketball coach. So, he was all, let the kid go. And I just fell in love with Branch McCracken, with IU stories. He used to have all the IU players up. We saw film, Jimmy Rail, so we go back. The bands, they came up, got their autographs. And, I was hooked on IU basketball through Branch McCracken. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the odd part of this is I'd always wanted to go, but to your point, I was not going to go to Indiana University before Coach Knight got there. I was not. There were problems, to tell you the truth. Even though they had really potentially a great team in '71 with George McGinnis as a sophomore, and he averaged 30 points a game, and Steve Downing was on that team, and Joby Wright, and some of the guys that have become dear friends of mine. But at that time, I was being recruited heavily by Kentucky. And really the SEC, everybody in the SEC. I was a Southern Indiana kid. And by the time I got to high school, the games of the week were not Big Ten games of the week. They're SEC games. And I got to watch Pistol Pete, Johnny Newman. That was my style. I said, hey, I'm going to fill it up. I'm going to go to an SEC team and shoot all the time. And the irony is I signed with the defensive-minded Bob Knight at Indiana. Some of the people that knew me go, are you insane? You'll never, you don't play defense. And I go, well, I can learn, which, I'd say Coach would argue that, yeah, you learn more about it, but you never learned it. But anyway, that's why I always say I had to be a great shooter because that's the only reason I was on the floor. It was my defense. But anyway, that's where I came from, was an SEC background. And until Coach Knight showed up, I was headed either to Vandy or to Kentucky. And I'll tell you honestly, I was really high on Kentucky until they signed the Mr. Basketballs of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky that year, and then signed 2 other Kentucky All-Stars. And I go, you know what? I'm already 8th on the depth chart coming in as a freshman. And then Coach Knight shows up and gives me the opportunity to play at Indiana, where I'd always wanted to, and I just took I kind of took a chance because, I believed in what he said, that we're going to do it right. We're going to be, he actually told my father and me in 71, he said, in 4 years, I want us to be in a position to win a national championship. So he had a 4-year plan. It happened in the 5th year, but, we were certainly right there in the 4th year.
Before we get to the Indiana career, I was looking at some old pictures. There's a picture of you when you played for Silver Creek. I think the first time you guys went to the regional, playing against George McGinnis. What was that like playing against? The picture just kind of shows what type of physical specimen Big George was at that. I mean, against mighty Silver Creek from Southern Indiana. What was that experience like going against him?
Yeah, I've got some of those pictures that I show people, and they just freak out because it's like there's George, obviously, and everybody else is a stick man. I mean, it's like a drawing. Like RT and I was a sophomore, I was, 6'4", 6'5", and about 170. And George was George. He was LeBron before LeBron. I mean, there's no question. And what's interesting is, we ended up, it was the afternoon of semi-state, and they beat us by 20. And very honestly, we Silver Creek folks were, kind of ecstatic. They only beat us by 20, but I know that George had 39 points and 25 boards and was in foul trouble. So they would have killed us. Plus, Alex, Washington had this deadly press. They didn't even use it on us. They just kind of, because they were playing for the night game, and so that night they played Jacksonville, who we would have beaten the heck out of without question. But they threw the press on them from moment one, and it was over. It was over. So we kind of sat there and go, "Gosh, we could have been embarrassed," but instead we showed ourselves pretty well. And very honestly, playing against George and Steve and those guys. At that age, when I was a sophomore, that got me notoriety in Indianapolis, which was a big deal for Southern Indiana. That really started from that point forward. I got a lot more attention than I probably ever would have. But you had to get to, those days, you had to get up, and Bob Williams was the famous sports writer for the Indianapolis papers. Shooting the Stars, and man, you got in his column, you knew you had done something good. So anyway, that was a big game for us. But scared is not even man. When we looked at him, I said, there ain't no way. And I remember my dad, our first time out, he kind of had that look on his face. We were down 8-0 or something, and it was really looking at us and like, anybody else got any ideas? Because nothing's going to work.
Running clock, maybe.
Oh man, anything. That was the one time. I wanted the clock guy to, hey, move that thing. Let's get this over with because they're going to win. And then of course they won the state, but and one of the greatest teams of all time.
Yeah. So your first interaction with Bob Knight was what?
At Silver Creek High School, he showed up, talked to my dad, and my dad's office, and my dad got me out of study hall and said, Steve, the new coach of Indiana University is here to see you. And my dad said this, and everybody says, you're just remembering it this way. No, I clearly remember him saying, I want you to go in and I want you to listen to him. And my dad had never said that about any coach. I mean, we had coaches in there all the time because recruiting was different back then. I always say Mike Flynn and I used to say hi to each other when, one school would have him out to dinner at the same place. There was only one place in town, so we'd end up the same place. And the next night I'd be with the coach he was with the night before it, and vice versa. We'd wave again. And so Mike and I, man, we feasted on the recruiting because nobody signed early back then. Right. So that's another reason I was still available as a senior because no one signed. No one indicated anything early. So anyway, he was there, and I went in, and that's when he sat down with me and did just kind of lay it out. He wasn't promising me anything other than to be a part of something that we wanted to be special. And he even had it he'd had it already said, we've got to get, here's what's going to happen. And, by the time you're a sophomore, we're going to need a sophomore or junior, we're going to need a center because Downing was going to graduate, and this time Downing was only going to be a junior the next year, but he's already thinking ahead 2 or 3 years. And of course, a couple of years later, we recruited Kent Benson. And so everything, that he laid out came true, other than he didn't predict Scott May was going to break his arm in 75, take 20 points out of it. But that's another story that we may or may not get into. But that first time was very impressive. And then I took my official visit to IU later, and it happened to be a Little 5 weekend. That doesn't hurt, So, right. And I got a letter from Dick Van Arsdale, because I told you the Vans were those are the guys still are. I still talk to the guys, and they're still my idols. And Dick wrote the letter, said, "Hey, Steve, I know Bob Knight, yada yada yada." And he goes, "And by the way, don't be a fool. The best looking women in the world are in Bloomington." So I read that and I go, you know what? I think IU's for me. So I'm a pretty simple guy. So that sounds good.
So you show up, obviously the plan is to redshirt as a freshman, because that's kind of what happened back then. What was that first year like when you're just, obviously it's a new coach, it's a new situation. He's trying to get his culture established, and you're trying to obviously make improvements as a player so you can be ready the following year. What's the first season like in Bloomington?
Well, let me just point out that my freshman year, 71-72, was the last year of freshmen not being eligible.
Right. Okay.
So all
you didn't have a choice.
But it was like a red shirt. But to your point, Alex, I was so lucky to have that year to develop my physical body. I was not ready to play Big Ten basketball. And had freshmen been eligible, I'm sure he would have played me, because that's what coaches do. They want to play their recruits, especially if things aren't going well, and things weren't going well during some of that season. So yeah, I was we had our own freshman schedule, but we practiced with the varsity every day, and we started seeing bits and pieces of the motion offense. We got to we got to see how he handled the varsity without us being kind of in what I would call in the line of direct fire, because we were just the freshmen. But, he didn't get on us as much as he got on those guys. So we got to learn at our own pace. And then we got to play, some freshman basketball. So that was really good back then. So it was a great learning experience. There's no question about this. And it's interesting that after my freshman year, John Laskowski, Steve Alfeld, and myself went up to Willis Reed's camp in New York. Coach sent us up there. We were going to be counselors. But before he went, it's interesting, he mapped out motion offense. He said, here's what I want you guys to do when you get in pickup games every night. And literally it was the beginning of our next year motion offense. We really worked on it. And the three of us looked at each other and go, oh my gosh, this works. I mean, this, just it kind of pick and roll and move without any set plays. And so we worked on that whole week we were up there. So we got for freshmen, we got a lot of attention, building up to our sophomore year. So we didn't have the pressure though of playing as a freshman, which was good for me.
So your first year playing, you guys go 11-3 in the Big Ten, 22-6 overall, make the Final Four. That kind of shows how great Coach Knight was in coming in and kind of turning a situation around quickly. Looking back on that season specifically, what do you think that made that such a special year and a special team?
Well, all along the way, I don't know that at the start of the year we would have ever gotten together and say, hey, here's the deal. We're gonna go to the Final Four this year. That's the goal. I think we would have looked at each other and said, that's a little bit beyond, anything we've done here at IU for a long time. What would make us think that? But we were clear about one thing, and a coach was always this way for his whole 29 years there. Let's win the Big Ten. Let's compete in the Big Ten. It's all about the Big Ten, winning that, because to him, and especially back then, that was a big, big deal, still is to me. But winning the Big Ten sets you up for the other things. And back then, too, you had to win the Big Ten to get in the NCAA tournament, right? So there was that. And there were big games that year. I mean, just huge games. Even before the Big Ten season, we went down to El Paso, Texas El Paso, and we played a Houston team that was loaded. I mean, 6'8", 6'9", 3 or 4 pros on there. And that was our first round opponent. We beat them. Coach had just sliced them, diced them, and and yet the next night the host team that was coached by UTEP, coached by Haskins, Don Haskins, one of Coach's buds, they beat us, and I think Coach got tossed that game, and it was a long ride home, and because I'll guarantee you we and I'll just speak for myself, might have been a little overconfident. We just brushed off Houston that, what's going to happen with UTEP. So we were still learning. I mean, we were learning as a team that, you don't do that. You play your best. You play as an Indiana team, and we don't worry about the opponent. If we do what we do right, we'll be okay. And we started to build from there. And we had some really great home games. Assembly Hall was really critical for us that year. We beat Minnesota, who was the defending Big Ten champs and loaded with talent. They beat us up there, but we beat them at home. Same thing with Ohio State. We lost over there, but won at home. So we had great games at home, and that was the key for us in winning the Big Ten championship. Really was Assembly Hall and the fans and the momentum and I'll tell you, one of the games Assembly Hall wasn't sold out at that time. People think it's always been that way, but we were building, and we would have big crowds for certain games. But I remember one time I dove for the ball at midcourt, and I got the ball, but I slid underneath. At that time, the scores table just had a little, apron around it. It was where everybody sits down, but it's just, so everybody was that way. And by the time I crawled out from underneath there, Coach was on the microphone. It was one of his first times on the microphone. You're really getting on the crowd. What are you doing? You're not applauding this effort. You're not, what? You're not going to see better effort. He really was trying to, that's what we're after. That was a great play. No, they didn't get the ball, but he went after it, and he was really ticked off that you guys aren't getting it. And so he actually started coaching the crowds even back then. And I've seen him, grab the mic more than once, but back then it was, no, hey gang, this is basketball. You give 100%, and then you guys up there need to appreciate that. And so it was that first year of learning. And then of course, when we win the Big Ten on the last day of the season, gosh, it was heartbreaking that we had to beat Purdue the last game, the year. But then we also needed Northwestern to beat Minnesota, which was like, nah, it's not going to happen. Sure enough, it did. And next thing we know, we're in the Mideast Regional.
So you mentioned the 74-75 season, and that's one that gets talked about as kind of the what if, maybe the ultimate what if in IU basketball history. What if Scott May doesn't get hurt? Yep. And I've heard you talk about it in the past. I think even my dad, we go to a lot of games together, and driving up from Louisville to Bloomington, we'll talk about old teams sometimes. And he's always said that he thinks that team was every bit as good as the next year's team, maybe better. What made that, obviously that was a tough pill to swallow, going undefeated and then having that happen. But that season, in many ways, kind of laid the foundation for what would ultimately happen in 75-76. But the 74-75 team, what made that such a special group?
Well, I think that by my senior year, which was 74-75, now we had 3 years of, 3-year players, Laz, myself, and then the freshman class, obviously, that now are going to be juniors, and it's Quinn, Scott, and Bobby. We've got Benny, as a sophomore. So we had a nice mix there, but we had enough, senior leadership, and we'd been through enough. We'd won enough. Remember, we tied the year before for the Big Ten championship. So we were going after our 3rd straight Big Ten championship, which was Coach's thing. That's where we were after, what we were after. But I'll tell you this, and this is an honest to God true story. At the end of the first practice, October 15th, we didn't have midnight madness back then. We just had madness, as we said, because it was always the first day of coaches' practice is like zigzag drills. And oh gosh, by the time you're a senior, you know, now how can I give the least effort but look like I'm giving maximum effort? Hey, Rook, come on. So I'd always say, hey, give me a freshman here. Now make me work. That's too much. So anyway, we'd always start that with a tough practice. But at the end of that practice, I brought everybody together. No coaches, just the team, and we looked at each other and I said, "Look, you know this guy. You know him well enough now, and you rookies, you freshmen, you'll learn to know him. There's only one way to keep this guy happy this year, and that's win every game. We're going to have to win every game. We're going to have to practice hard, but let's don't be stupid about this. Don't let him get on us, because if we go out and win, then we don't have to be, going through practices that are extraordinarily hard. I mean, it was kind of kind of a Forrest Gump moment. It was like, hey, how about that, everybody? And of course, yeah, sure, let's win every game. But there was a purpose with each and every game. Is we're going to play Indiana basketball. We don't care who we're playing against. If we play our way, we were that confident. If we play, the way we know we can play, then we're going to win. We're going to win games. And in fact, we would go into games actually with a chip on our shoulder, knowing that, it would be a horrible mistake for the other team to win, because we worked harder than they did. We know we did. We had convinced ourselves, and probably there's some truth to that. We worked harder this week than they did. So there's, if things are fair, we're going to win this game. And so let's get it over. And we used to get it over. Our big thing was 5 minutes. 5 minutes first half, 5 minutes second half. Plain and simple. Beat them hard the first 5 minutes, and that second half come out and beat them again at 5 minutes. And let's get the starters over on the bench and let them put a towel over there and watch our second team, who was better than most teams we faced. Watch them, for the last 5 to 10 minutes. I'm the biggest front runner there ever was, and let's get it over with. I hated overtime games. Let's get, we don't need extra minutes. Let's beat them, and let's get out of here and get something to eat. So we had a confidence. There's no question about it.
That season, when you talked about practice and kind of, everybody kind of being on the same page, but when you have those, you're winning every game. I would think that sometimes maybe practice is even harder than the games. What was it like on a day-to-day basis going against some of those guys? Bobby Wilkerson, Quinn. Yeah. I mean, those guys are all-time greats, obviously, at Indiana, as are you. But those moments in practice had to be more competitive than a lot of the games you played.
Oh, no question, because. And this goes for all teams to some degree, but for us, it was especially that way that, of course, everybody on our team knew the plays, right? And they know exactly what we're supposed to do when, if a guy plays me this way, I'm going to come off the pick that way. Well, the guy guarding me knows exactly that too. And it was very difficult to play against, I don't even call them the second team, or, the other guys. It was always very competitive, and we hated it when coach got, if he got pissed off on somebody and said, okay, hey, Bobby Wilkerson, you go on the second team. And it's like, oh, no, don't put him on the second team, because then he's going to guard me, or he's going to do, and coach would mix it up like that. No, don't do that. I like Bobby and Quinn on my side, because, they play defense. They're great players. I want them passing me the ball in the right positions. I don't want to play with anybody but those guys. So we did have a great level of trust, and we had some great guys, Aber being, one of the guys that was great to come off the bench. Laz, of course, was well known for that. So, we had the right mixture, we thought. But man, there were some practices that, again, as long as we're winning, we knew it could be worse. If practice could be really bad if we're not winning. But then he got to the point, obviously, coach got to the point where we didn't win pretty enough,
Yeah.
we should, hey guys, we should have beat Iowa by 40. What the heck are we beating them by 28 for? It's like, dang, coach, because we beat them by 28. And so the bar was set pretty high. And we always laugh that poor assistant coaches, coach would turn it over sometimes. And I've told Brian this, and he just laughs because I think it just happens in all programs. But with us, the assistant coach, Bob Weltlake, would come out, and he would be the guy that scouted the next team we were going to play. And, and coach would always set him up and say, hey, Bob, tell these guys, if they don't play well, what's going to happen? And, Weltlake would say something like, we'll get killed. And we would just we'd laugh like, that's so much BS. I said, we don't believe that. We're going to kill this team. I don't care what you say. So we had that air about us that, come on, don't lie to us. But we knew it was all kind of an act anyway. Yeah, so he'd really say, this guy's probably one of the best players you're ever going to play against. And we'd look at each other like, he couldn't make our team, so what do we care? So anyway, we pay attention, but we knew if we just did what we did from the tip, we're going to be fine.
Was every moment with Knight intense, or was there ever moments where he was different than what we, see portrayed out in the public in terms of his sideline demeanor? Was there ever moments where he wasn't this intense coach?
Oh yeah, and of course, your memory is always, sometimes we remember all the good things and not so much the other times. And as we've gotten older, it's been a joy to be around him. We tell stories, and he's a wonderful, loyal friend. But yeah, back then we loved those. He's a quick wit. I mean, he is. He's a funny guy, well-read. You just couldn't trip him up. But yeah, we'd shoot horse afterwards. For instance, that I loved it when he said, "Hey, Green, let's shoot some horse." But I'm saying, "Oh yeah, all right, old man, come on out here," and I'd step him out. But if you miss one, then he starts shooting circus shots. Of all people, Bob Knight, you would think would be more straightforward shooter. No, you'd have to cross your legs, in some fashion, shoot left-handed over your back, and he had all the trick shots, so, and he just loved that. He just loved taking milkshake money from us by shooting these weird shots that he would never let us even practice. Right. So yeah, we saw that side of him, but hey man, that guy's happy when we're winning. So we had a happy year. We were winning. So we didn't get, in fact, Jimmy Cruz, who was on the team, obviously, in both 75 and then in 76, when they won it all, became a, assistant coach with Coach. And I remember talking to Jimmy, and talking about practices. It's crazy because the team had lost maybe 8 games. And I go, gosh, Jimmy, he never acted that way, around us, really that force. And he looked at me and he goes, we never lost. That was the secret. We just didn't lose. So we never saw that side of him. And especially that group, they, for 2 years, they only lost 1 game. In 2 years, they didn't see that, but man, you start losing 10 games in a year. Oh my God. That's when we said, oh gosh, that is scary. But we didn't. So we didn't see that side of him. I always would tell people though that, you'd see Coach just blow up over a simple bad pass by somebody, in a game on Saturday. And people, even my parents, my mother, not my dad, because he was a basketball coach and knew better, but my mother would say, why did he get so upset with, Jimmy Wissman for throwing that pass? We were up 25 points, blah, blah, blah. It was 5 minutes to go. So the game was won. But I had to remind her and remind myself, Coach had probably seen him make that bad pass 4 times that week. And it was the 5th time. And that was it. He went off, because he didn't care if the TV was watching. He didn't care if Assembly Hall was full. You made the same mistake I told you not to make, or against, an out of bounds situation. Hey, we went over and over this and the guy still scored. Oh, he would go off, and rightfully so. Hey, we worked on it. It'd be different if it was a surprise, but we didn't have surprises. I mean, he knew he set us up for victory all day long. And as Brian and I say here, he never complicated winning. Hey, if this is what we have to do to win, then we're going to do this. Let's don't get fancy. Let's don't outsmart anybody. Let's just do what we have to do to win the game. Don't complicate it.
So you kind of led me into the next topic I wanted to talk about when you said complicating winning. Indiana has complicated winning for 21 years. They've had some seasons obviously that have been fun, that have, they've had some good teams obviously in that span. They made the championship game in 2002. I think a lot of people would say that the Zeller and the Oladipo years were fun. Yogi Ferrell was a fun player to watch, but there hasn't been any consistency. And I think something that you brought up earlier is a good point that people forget about, because I get asked a lot about, when's Indiana going to be nationally relevant again and all this stuff. And I obviously the program's prestige makes it relevant to an extent, but I think the main thing that I see is there hasn't been enough winning in the Big Ten, right? You got to win in the Big Ten before you're even talking about these other things like making deep tournament runs. Do you agree with that premise? And also, what have you kind of seen? Because I know you follow the program. What have you seen kind of over these last 21 years that has led to just the inconsistencies that have frustrated a lot of fans?
Well, to take your first point about, the Big Ten and the importance of the Big Ten, I'll guarantee you one thing. Woody knows that's number one, and and he's more my vintage than anybody else. I talked with Brian, about the next coach, and we're talking about some guys, I'll just say younger, but Woody is my era, or just right afterwards. Mm-hmm. I know he knows that. I know he knows how to get on players properly. I mean, he's got all of the skills, but he has the attention. He's going to have the attention of these guys. We're going to do well in the Big Ten. We want to win those Big Ten championships, because I think that's what gets you ready. And ironically, back in the day, there was criticism. Yeah, Coach Knight, they win 20 games, and they do well in the Big Ten, but they don't do well in the NCAA tournament. We got to do better with that, NCAA tournament, because there were some early exits and all that. But the bottom line is, hey, our regular season is about winning the Big Ten, so we got to get back to that, and let's work pre-Big Ten. Let's work things out. Coach, Knight used to. I mean, you might have 15 different starting lineups by the time the Big Ten Big Ten season came around. He tried everybody, and he used the bench. And this goes to your second point. I remember wanting Tom Crean, for instance, to use the bench as his ally. When guys aren't doing what you want, sit them down. And there was almost a reluctance. Yeah, but we can't win without these three guys. Well, you know what? You can't win with them either. So let's shake it up. Make sure that everybody's held accountable, and you sit them down and say, you're not playing until you learn how to do this. And I'm going to watch somebody that's busting his butt out there. They may not be as good as you, but they're going to play until you learn this. So I think there's been some of that, and that's. I think that's what scared some people. We don't want another Knight player in there. We don't want a Coach Knight. We don't want somebody yelling at our players and that kind of thing. Well, you know what? Woody's not. He's not a clone of Bob Knight, and he's his own man. He's gone out and he's gotten all kinds of experience. We're all different, but I want Woody to come in with a lot of Coach Knight's philosophies on winning and how you do it and how you hold people accountable. That's what's going to happen. I mean, there's no question about it. Is Mike Woodson going to throw a chair? No, he ain't going to throw no chair. Okay. But except to Jess. But you know what? Does Mike Woodson have the same principles as Bob Knight as it relates to winning basketball? Absolutely. So that's what I'm excited about. And then, hey, let's bring in other like-minded people. Let's go for it. We waited 21 years, to kind of turn the page back a little bit. And as much as we kind of scratched our head and said, would Woody even want it? I've been in the pros for that long. I know one thing. That dude loves IU, and he loves IU basketball. He loves Coach Knight. I just think he's got the right combination of of history and also the ability to look ahead and see, hey, here's what the pros want in a player too. So, which is important to a lot of today's kids. It wasn't as important back in our day. It just wasn't. You wanted to play well in college and hope that you got a chance in the pros. But now it's different. People want to get to the pros. There's no question about it. And Woody can do both.
Before the Mike Woodson hire, I heard John with Matt Dennison in Southern Indiana. You were talking about some potential candidates and things like that. And one thing you did make clear was you weren't necessarily married to the idea that it had to be an IU guy. But
right,
did you have any problem, over the since Knight was let go? Did you have any problem that they never went with an IU guy over that long period of time, or did you think? Yeah.
Oh yeah, Alex. In fact, I lobbied hard for Steve Alford when he was at Iowa, and they had just won the Big Ten championships here in Indianapolis. Before, it must have been in 2006 when they hired Kelvin Sampson. Mm-hmm. And before that, and I remember I called Steve and I said, "Hey man, just stay here. Don't go back to Iowa. just drive down to Bloomington." He goes, "Absolutely." I mean, that was only 5 or 6 years after Coach left. That no, I did. I wanted a guy, and he was a proven winner. And I thought Steve would do a good job. And we can argue that all we want to, whether he would or wouldn't, but he didn't get the opportunity. We didn't get asked. Former players didn't get asked much at all during that time. Is there bitterness there? No, it just was. Why not use the assets that you have? Just at least a conversation, which Scott Dolson did. He engaged former players in conversations. I mean, he just did. Right. That didn't mean he was going to get an IU guy. I mean, would a Chris Beard, have sufficed, if you will? Well, part of that was I know Chris Beard from my visits down to Lubbock to see Coach Knight, and I know he was with Coach for 10 years. Yeah, there was a part of me that was very comfortable with that side of Chris. So, there's that. Tony Bennett, I thought, his dad coached at Wisconsin, and, Midwestern guy, he played it, so there were other people that, as long as they came in and emphasized the right things and got us back to winning, we want to win. I mean, that's it. Winning isn't everything, but daggone, losing is nothing. So I'm ready to see us win some important ball games and get back on the map. That's for sure.
Do you think with what Mike Woodson's inherited? I know you watch the games and you're familiar with kind of the players. Do you think there's enough talent to be good next year? I mean, obviously he's added some pieces from the transfer portal. It's totally different, obviously, from when you were playing. Now it's almost like a free agency in college basketball.
Sure.
But do you think with Trace coming back and some of these other guys he's added, do you think there's enough there to go ahead and be a pretty good team right from the get-go?
Yes, I do. Although I heard the jokes too that were like everybody in IU land was getting all excited. Hey, everybody's coming back, and we were going, yeah, they went 12-15 last year. So watch what you wish for. But I think that's where coaching comes in. Number one, I think that's where I think Trace is going to have an opportunity to help Indiana University and Coach Woodson help him. I think Woody probably looked him in the eye and said, you know what? I just came from the NBA. You might want to stick around, and let's increase your value at the next level. But while doing that, hey, let's win some ball games here. So I think we're going to see Trace Jackson used differently, better. But it still comes down, Alex, that we got to put the ball in the hole, man. I mean, we just got to. And if those shooters, we did recruit what we thought were shooters in the freshman class. And, I know you kind of, but were they given the opportunity? Were they? One of the big things, and Brian and I talk about this all the time, is confidence. And confidence in your shooting. You gotta be put in a position to win. You got to be put in a position to shoot. That was one of the secrets that he and I both shared. Is we knew one thing when we were going down the court: we're going to get a pick, and we're going to get a pass, and we're going to have a chance to shoot it. But we also had a coach that believed in us. So we got to make sure. And Woody's going to be the first guy. Hey, it's not going to take him many practices for him to start seeing, hey, who can I count on, and in what position do I need to put them so that they can succeed. That's good coaching. But I hope so. Let's put it that way. I hope we've got the talent, and we probably won't know for, certainly the first 10 games we'll have a better idea. But until you get into Big Ten competition, we may not know how good can we be next year.
I got two more quick things before we get you out of here. Sure. From a confidence perspective, you talked about that. Was that the biggest thing that you think was missing these last couple of years with Archie? Because I felt like game after game I was writing the same thing. They can't make shots. They can't make free throws. Do you think it was just a matter of not having confidence? Because I saw a lot of these kids play in high school, and by the time they were 2 or 3 years into the system, they looked totally different to me just in terms of how they carried themselves on the court. To me, that had to be something from a coaching and confidence perspective.
Yeah, and I don't know. I can't put. I wasn't close enough to the program to know. I didn't see enough practices. I know that there were hard, tough, long practices. I remember going down and seeing Tom Crean's practice, about the third or fourth year when we did have some really good players there. And at 2.5 hours, they were still going hard, and he was still, and I was with Bob Hamill, and I looked at Hamill and I go, did we ever work that hard, that long? And he goes, nope. And I go, I didn't think so. And I thought we worked for the man that was supposed to be the taskmaster. No, we never did that, So there's that too. It's just sometimes it's, you just pound it into guys, these long practices and you're not good enough. You got to work harder. You got, there comes a point where you just got to, you got to instill some confidence in a certain group of guys. At least 8 of the guys have got to know, hey, if I go in the game, I'm in there and I know what I'm going to do and I know when I'm going to do it. So I just think it's a collective attitude, but it comes from the head man down. And this isn't an Archie Miller, Tom Crean bashing. It's a pro Mike Woodson. Woody knows that, and Woody's talked to guys 30 years old, and got in their face, say, hey, you're a better player than that, or don't ever take that shot again. So I think he'll be fine with 18, 19-year-olds.
So I think one thing that I've heard from fans that they're most excited about is now that there's a chance to kind of bring all these eras from IU basketball back together again. I don't think that's really been done. There's a feeling that everybody who's played for the program, at least Mike Woodson has publicly said that everybody's going to be welcome back and it's going to be, a family atmosphere. As a former player, what's your reaction to hearing him saying that? Because it's obviously got to feel good to have somebody that wants to bring all this together again.
Sure. No, and I've said I love Woody, and it's a weird thing. I didn't get to see Mike Woodson play that much because the 4 years he was at IU, I was in the pros. So we just didn't get to, and we didn't have ESPN, and we didn't get to see many games. I only had heard from Coach Knight, about Woody, but I've gotten to know him, through the years at golf outings and get-togethers, and he's a great guy. I love Woody. And I think, he's not going to let a bunch of former players just start running in and demanding that, hey, I want to sit there and I want this. No, he's going to have control over it, but we're going to feel welcome, to come in and watch a practice. And we're going to, if the phone rings and it's Mike Woodson or any of the assistants saying, hey, can you talk to a kid? Can you come down? We'll be there that day. There's no question. So we want to help. But if helping, if Woody says, hey, you know what, guys, keep your distance for a while. Let me handle this for a while. We'll do that too. But I know Woody is like, hey, come on, guys, let's all win and let's all take credit for this. He's not going to be the kind of guy that said, well, yeah, the secret was me, but don't worry, the secret may be him.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you've been very gracious with your time. We really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to have you on Podcast on the Brink, and everybody, we'll be back next week with another episode. If you enjoy the show, as always, leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks again for your time, Steve, and we'll be back again next week, everybody, with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.
Thanks, Alex.